poll. And one of the things that happened, unexpected things, was that people didn't like the fact that we had raised the pride flag here in Montgomery County. And what started with a bunch of emails, hateful tweets, turned into hateful phone calls, which resulted in my office not answering our phone for 3 days because the volume of phone calls was so much and it was so disturbing because people had been tweeting it out nationally. That we had the audacity here to celebrate our beautifully diverse community. And so after Pride Month last year, I resolved myself to do it bigger and better this year and didn't realize it would be virtually, but we did a number of events virtually. And one of the events that we did in person was raise the pride flag, and I did that with County Executive Elrich. And thankfully, the number of hateful messages diminished precipitously. Hardly anyone contacted me, and it might be for a confluence of reasons, but I view that as progress, that people have finally gotten used to the fact that we're going to raise the pride flag here, and we're going to have a number of events here because that's who we are here in Montgomery County. And the progress that we've made is not limited to Montgomery County, but here in Maryland, we've been leading in progress to support the LGBTQ community, because back in 2012, when I was a member of the Board for Equality Maryland, we were the first state in the country to pass marriage equality by referendum here. Now, it's my understanding that the state of Maine also passed it on the same night that we did, but our polls closed first. So I'll take that as a victory here. But one of the architects of that strategy who should claim victory for the progress that was made was Jamie Raskin. Who then was my state senator, proud state senator from Maryland's 20th legislative district, who was the lead sponsor for the marriage equality effort. And now I'm proud to say that he is our congressman from Maryland's 8th district. And so, Congressman, I am so proud of everything that you have done here in the state. And I am so proud of everything that you are doing in Congress, not only to expand civil rights, civil liberties, but also to hold the president accountable and to make sure that the rule of law is applied. And so with no further ado, Congressman, I turn it over to you and just again want to extend my sincere thanks for everything that you've done and continue to do here.
I totally appreciate that, Evan, and I love your leadership and I love your commitment to Montgomery County. And you, like Donica, are a former journalist, and you bring a remarkable sense of critical objectivity to what government does, at the same time that you have this beautiful passion for inclusion for everybody. So I am proud to be represented by you in the County Council. Linda, thank you for your leadership. Sam, you know, the Central Committee, I don't know what it is about COVID-19, but the Central Committee has been more active and more present than ever, and these events just get better and better. So I want to salute you for making a political lemonade out of the lemon we've been dealt by the lethal incompetence and mismanagement of Donald Trump and his cronies. And I also noted that Donica Rome was here, and I knew Donica Rome before Donica Rome was Donica Rome when she was a journalist, I think for the Washington Blade. Is that right, Donica? Was it?
That was with the Montgomery County Sentinel. I was under Brian Carum.
Okay, at the Sentinel.
Yeah, and I had changed my name by that point, so I was Danica Rome by that point.
Okay, and so she was a great reporter, and I always loved talking to her. And next thing you know, she's nationwide news in winning as I think our first transgender state legislator across America, and she's an amazing legislator and representative for people. So I am so easier to get these huge political stars now that everything's on Zoom, because I don't know where Sean Patrick is right now, but they don't necessarily have to travel and come and spend the night and do the hotel thing. But he was extremely gracious about coming, and we're thrilled, Sean Patrick, to welcome you here. Sean Patrick is a leader of really rare talent and has the gift of expressing himself in a way that moves thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people. And I remember in the last term when the Trump administration was moving to essentially reinstate discrimination in adoption through the provision of federal funding. And Sean Patrick Maloney came to testify before the Judiciary Committee. I will never forget his spellbinding testimony about what he and his family went through to adopt. And the commitment that lesbian and gay and LGBTQ people have had to all of us in America, despite these repeated efforts to undermine them, to undercut them, and to prevent them from equality purely out of an effort to stigmatize and demonize and vilify them. And people, a majority of the Judiciary Committee on the Democratic side, I should say, were crying, listening to him. And he spoke without a note. He spoke completely from his own experience, but he synthesized it in a way that made it very powerful as an explanation of what was so devious and diabolical about what the administration was trying to do. I will never forget that day. But he's an amazing member of the House Intelligence Committee who was a leader when in All in a Day's work, we saw what Donald Trump happened to be doing on one day with Ukraine. And of course, that was just the typical mob style work of the administration. But I got to serve closely with him when we got into the impeachment process, and he was a heroic figure then. So Sean Patrick, thank you so much for coming to talk to everybody. And the only thing that I will add, picking up on what Evan said, was I still consider it an absolute highlight of my career in politics to have been the floor leader and one of the sponsors of marriage equality in Maryland. And we did become the first state to pass marriage equality without a judicial order compelling us to do so. All glory to Massachusetts in all cases, of course. But no, they did have that Supreme Court decision in Massachusetts, the SJC's decision in the Goodrich case, whereas our high court went the other way and said it was not an equal protection imperative. But we went ahead and did it anyway. And as Evan said, we defended it at the polls. But I raise it just to say that things can change very quickly and very radically. And I remember when I first ran for the state Senate and back in 2006, and I used to talk about marriage equality. And a woman came up to me at my opening statement, and I had laid out everything I wanted to do: abolish the death penalty, decriminalize marijuana, all this stuff, and marriage equality. And she said, "Jamie, great speech. I love your speech. But one thing, take out everything you got in there about gay marriage, because it's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. Even gay candidates don't talk about it sometimes. And it makes you sound like you're really extreme, like you're not in the political center." And that was the moment when I guess I developed through an epiphany my political motto. And I said, you know, I appreciate your telling me this because it makes me realize it's not my ambition to be in the political center, which blows around with the wind. It's my ambition to be in the moral center and to try to find what's right and then bring the political center to us. And so I tell that story because it reminds me of Sean Patrick Maloney and his approach to politics and the remarkable times we're living in. And so, Sean Patrick, thank you for joining us here virtually in Montgomery County, Maryland, and the floor is yours. And unfortunately, I got to leave in about 8 minutes, but I look forward to listening as much as I can.
Hey, thank you so much, Jamie. And hello, Montgomery County Democrats. This is a first for me, and I'm very excited to be with you tonight. I have to say thank you to Linda Foley and to Sam Jones and to Evan Glass. It's great to be with Danica Rome and so many of you who are all, by definition, leaders in our movement for equality and for a better country. You know, I got to tell you, you got one of the best in Jamie Raskin, and you are so lucky to have him. You know, he is so smart and he is so nice. There may be people who are smarter and nicer, and there may be people who are nicer and smarter, but no one is smarter who's nicer than Jamie Raskin. And I will tell you, he has been kicking butt in Congress since the day he got there. And he's now vice chair of Judiciary and of Oversight, I believe, if I got that right, Jamie, which is no small thing. Also leads the freshman class. This guy is already making a huge impact. And if I want to know something, I go and talk to Jamie. We were joking before he got on the phone tonight. It's a lot quicker than going to my staff or the Congressional Research Service. I just ask Jamie Raskin, and he has the answer to every question. And he can do the politics, he can do the policy. He's just a great member of Congress. And that bit about finding the moral center is absolutely wonderful, and it definitely defines your service. So thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. Listen, folks, I just want to say happy Pride to everybody. A little bit late, but I'll tell you, it's been a different kind of Pride this year. As you all know, I had the honor of delivering the Democratic address for Pride Week this year. The speaker asked me to do that, and I was proud to do it. I also had the honor of sitting in the chair when we passed the Equality Act not long ago and presiding over the session. And it's hard when you do that not to reflect on how far we've come. I mean, I'm old enough, I'm looking around, many of you are old enough to remember just a few years ago when we were in a very different place in this country. When I got elected to Congress in 2012, it was illegal for my husband, Randy, and our 3 children to have health insurance in the House of Representatives. I don't know if people even realize that anymore. And when I tell some of my colleagues that, they say, oh, that can't be right. And I say, yeah, it was, and you voted for it. It was called the Defense of Marriage Act. And so in just such a short period of time, we have not only secured equal rights in things like health insurance and federal service, but of course, full marriage rights, and hate crimes legislation, and to the ban of the military, and so many other things. Just recently, the landmark decision by the Supreme Court, including us in Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. These are major accomplishments, and they didn't just happen. And it's because we made this system work for us, and it was out of things like the horror of AIDS and watching our friends die. It was out of the necessity to build our own organizations, to realize we had to take control of this ourselves. But I also think, and this is what I want to talk about just quickly, we are uniquely positioned to be allies, I think, in this moment when our society is energized across so many major issues. Look at what's going on in America. It is not just that we have an extraordinary amount of energy. It's that it is focused on things like the climate movement, the Sunrise Movement, things like the Parkland kids focused on gun safety, things like the Dreamer movement focused on immigration, things like the Me Too movement focused on finally ending the scourge of sexual harassment and abuse and workplace harassment. Think about things like now the Black Lives Matter movement in its real second major national incarnation, fueled by the tragedy in Minneapolis. But all of these movements are in reaction in many ways to what people are seeing in the presidency of Donald Trump. We have the most energized, activated generation since the 60s. And even though they may be focused on separate issues, they have one thing in common, which is that they don't think the system is working, and they want results. And they're tired not just of the direction it's going in, but I think of the failure of both parties in many ways to actually deliver results at the scale of the problems and the frustrations that people have. And I think as LGBTQ people, we have set a standard for achieving the impossible that should make people feel pretty good. And it's worth looking at how we did it. And first and foremost, we created our own organizations and we all got active. But in addition to that, we built alliances and we built a coalition. And we welcomed in people who didn't agree with us at one point, but now do. In fact, most of the people who we celebrate as our allies right now were not so long ago not our allies at all. And that would be true more in the Republican Party, but certainly in the Democratic Party as well. I think there's a lesson in that for other movements. How do we build coalition? How do we focus on addition and not just being right? But in addition to that, I think we've got a particular responsibility in the Black Lives Matter movement right now to be good allies to people demanding real change and real justice in our country. It's a good way to celebrate Pride Month, to go to a Black Lives Matter protest. That's what I did with my kids. And I think we understand that Stonewall started as a riot against police brutality, and that our movement right now has a terrible problem of violence against transgender people of color, and that we need to build solidarity across all our lines of difference. And we're uniquely positioned to do that. So we should be both good allies and we should be both good coalition builders. And I think we can speak with authority around something that Jamie just said, which is something Eleanor Roosevelt said in a different way. She said, you must do the thing you think you cannot do. And I think that right now in America is what should define the Democratic Party. And I have never been more proud to be a Democrat. And so I think all of you who spend your time loyal to the Democratic Party should feel pretty good about yourselves. because we are a party right now that is not perfect, God knows. And we've got our disagreements and we've got our faults. But you know what? We're clear that racism is wrong. We're dedicated to the fact that all people should be equal in this country, men and women and people who are African American and Latino and Native and Asian and from every religion and origin and across all our lines of difference, including LGBTQ people. And that's a good thing. And that is different than the other guys. We're committed to a woman's right to control her own body and to make reproductive choices. Today, we saw the court expand the concept of religious liberty, something I've been warning about even as we celebrate decisions, including LGBTQ people in the civil rights legislation. We have to guard against discrimination masquerading as religious liberty. That's a difference between the two parties. And it goes on and on. We take the climate movement seriously. We take gun safety seriously. We take so many of the causes like immigration and the dreamers into our hearts and want to do something about it. And the difference between the two parties has never been greater. And the stakes this year have never been higher. And sometimes I think when you're in a state like Maryland, it's easy for people to say, well, we're not going to vote for Donald Trump. But the fact is you have competitive congressional races in Maryland. You know this. You've got lots of competitive races in Maryland. And organizing and activating and getting people involved who haven't been involved before is so important. And that's what you all are doing. And I got to tell you, I've seen it work a miracle in my own life. I never thought I could be married. I never thought I could have 3 children and have the life I do. I'm the first openly gay member of Congress ever elected to the state of New York. But just a couple of weeks ago, we elected 2 more. And right now, from the Bronx, in the poorest congressional district in New York, where Richie Torres is going to join the delegation, from the Bronx through southern Westchester, northern Westchester, Rockland County, Putnam County, Orange County, Dutchess, Ulster, north of Albany, the only members of the congressional delegation will be African American or gay or both. So I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that the things we can achieve in the area of diversity in conservative suburbs, not in urban areas, I think is only just beginning. If we rededicate our party and ourselves to being relevant in all the things that matter in people's lives, and if we think big again. And so I'm proud of the work you're doing. I'm proud to support it. I'm honored to be included with folks like Jamie Raskin and Danica Rome and others. And I just want to tell you, keep going. I know it's been a rough stretch. I know this isn't a substitute for getting together in person, but we got to push harder than ever. We got 90 days before people are voting, maybe 73, Danica told me. That's amazing when you think about it. This thing is on. And I want to be standing here with all of you in January watching Donald Trump fly away, never to be seen again anywhere near the White House. And if we do that and we elect a Democratic Senate, I think we can be excited about the possibilities once again for a country where we're all free, where we're all equal, and we're building something great together. So you guys are doing that, and I'm proud to be a Democrat and proud to be among you. So thank you all very much. I'm going to throw it back to Linda or back to Danica. Thank you, though.
Sam, go ahead, Sam. Go ahead, Sam. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Congressman. And now I'm very excited to introduce Danica Rome. Delegate Rome represents Virginia's 13th district in the House of Delegates. Prior to running for office in 2017, she worked as a journalist and became deeply familiar with the problems that residents of the 13th district face, including access to education and transportation issues, knowing the problems her constituents faced in their daily lives and especially in their daily commutes. Delegate Rome ran on a platform of results-oriented leadership. And as the first openly trans person to be elected and to serve in state legislature in the nation, she is a trailblazer in every sense of the word, not just in Virginia, but around the country. Last year, she was reelected and will continue to fight for equity, equality, and inclusion for all. Delegate, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you all so much for having me here, and to our 2 members of Congress here, to Congressman Maloney, who's just been such a beacon for so many LGBTQ people in Congress and so needed. It is so good to see family get elected to Congress, let alone on this call today, along with Congressman Glass, by the way. And what people need to know with Congressman Raskin is I used to interview him when I was working for the Montgomery County Sentinel for 2015, 2016. And there was not a single major issue that he did not have a part of at some point. And I mean everything from marriage equality and climate change all the way to Noah's Law when he was sitting on the Judiciary Committee, and I was sitting in the General Assembly covering those hearings. And what very few people know is that Congressman Raskin kept his promise from 2016 to introduce a shield law to protect reporters from being jailed to, if they reveal the identity of a confidential source. He made that promise at the debate that the Montgomery County Sentinel hosted. I was the one who told Brian to say that, who suggested it, because he had actually been locked up before. And Jamie's also worked across the aisle with Representative Jim Jordan to try to get something done, because that's how important this issue is. And meanwhile, just this year in Virginia, third try, we finally got our state shield law done this year. That's my bill, HB 113. So, so basically, as of July 1st, which is now passed, it is now illegal you cannot force a reporter to reveal the identity of a confidential source, which is exactly where we should go. We need a strong, truly free, independent press, and that is a core value for me, along with everything else that we're talking about here today. So Congressman Raskin, thank you for your leadership. We actually pulled up your bill to help me on my state level bill. So I really appreciate that. And I just want to also just tell everyone who's on here from Montgomery County, just like that, Montgomery County will always have a place in my heart. It will always, I have a ton of friends and family in Montgomery County. Delegate Leslie Lopez and I are actually doing a blood drive together in Germantown on July 29th. So if any of y'all want to join us, please, by all means, feel free. And then I'm going to bring her over here on my birthday on September 30th to donate blood over here as well. It's just, I always know I'm welcome. I'm always know I'm home whenever, I'm in Moco. So thank you all so much for all you do just to be welcoming. And I will tell you, I love driving downtown in Rockville and seeing the flags of the world everywhere, because it truly does make a statement about inclusivity, it's a statement of affirmation about who you're for as opposed to who you're against. And what, Councilman Glass was talking about in terms of raising the pride flag, the fact that he can have that many people say so many horrible things toward him afterward, I hope that goes to show that we aren't done yet. We have a long way to go. We have a lot of work to go. And what we just saw in the Supreme Court today, as a trans woman, one ruling says that if I worked at the Catholic schools that I went to as a kid, I spent 13 years in Catholic schools, that they could fire me for being trans. Another ruling said that they could deny me health care, my hormone replacement therapy, for being trans, because what they were saying that they have moral objections to birth control. That means they can have moral objections to my estradiol, to my spironolactone, to my progesterone. They could, say no to any surgeries. They could just say no. And that the Supreme Court was ruling that they have the ability to do that, which means that Congress, when we have a full Democratic Congress, by the way, with a Democratic president, that means we're going to have supplemental insurance that is going to be as cheap as humanly possible for people to be able to afford, so that they can actually, have access to the birth control that they need, regardless of who their employer is. And that also means that we have a lot to work, and it's going to be patchwork, unfortunately, to do in the states, so that we can make sure that our constituents aren't left under the bus, which is exactly what's, going to be happening because of this ruling. So I hope people recognize that, yeah, we had one great ruling about equality, about employment earlier, last month. That was nice. That was good. Glad we got it. We're not done yet. We have to remember this. John Roberts and Neil Gorsuch are not our friends. Okay. It is because the Trump administration is so inept. It is so bad at their jobs that John Roberts has to check them and say, like, no, you're actually wrong, because whether or not I agree with this, and the word choice that he used, both in terms of upholding the ACA and what he used this time around for the DACA ruling, was this is not a statement of us judging the wisdom of the law. It's about interpreting the law itself and what you can and can't do. And the thing out of the DACA ruling was, the Trump administration was just so phenomenally bad at administrative law and administrative policy and procedure, which I know for Jamie is just like, you know, ears perked. But this is the real deal. If you have incompetent people, then maybe you can get a lucky Supreme Court ruling here and there. Don't count on it in the long term. We need President Biden nominating people who understand that the Constitution is designed to protect everyone, that it's an evolving document, that it is something that is not just stagnant from the 1700s, that this is something that actually matters and applies to our day-to-day lives. We have to win this election and understand that the two most important issues anyone can vote on, you know, when you're dealing with the presidency, are war and Supreme Court nominations. Those top two. Everything else is going to be, you know, dependent on one of these two. You have to have a strong Supreme Court. And so, to follow up on what Congressman Maloney was talking about before, about how Pride Month feels a little different right now, and how we're trying to stick up for, you know, Black Lives, you know, Matter movement, and the question that just came in from Roger about how does the Black Lives Matter movement enhance LGBTQ movement. Our movement is inherently tied to theirs. It is inherently one and the same because it is inherently intersectional. That means it is inherently ours, and this just the same that ours must be theirs. The reason I say that is when you look at who started Stonewall in the first place, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, as Black and brown trans women who decided in 1969 that they weren't going to put up with crap anymore, that they weren't going to put up with police brutality, that they were tired of being singled out and stigmatized for who they were, let alone physically assaulted and attacked and left homeless and assaulted. And if you were Sylvia Rivera, raped from the time that you were a tween. Just think about that through, that's where LGBTQ leaders and trans women of color specifically were leading in 1969. And we started marching in 1970. This is the year, 2020, is the year where we in our Pride community got back to our roots. Pride was never supposed to just be about the largest floats that you can have going around DuPont Circle and the best corporate sponsorship you can have. And look, it's good that companies are on board now. It's good that more and more people are supporting us. We welcome that. But Pride wasn't about a giant festivity. It was about demanding our rights. It was about demanding equality, demanding justice, and above all, demanding liberation. That's where we are now. That's what June 2020 will have to go down with, in the same way that we talk about the summer of 1968. June 2020 was a time that we in the LGBTQ community returned to our roots of protest and demanding liberation, demanding equality, and demanding equity for people, no matter what they look like, where they come from, how they worship if they do, or who they love. That this is our America too, and it's time for us to run it. And all of us have that responsibility the same as any other person in this country. And that when we see racial injustice, then we have to be the ones who step up and do something about it, just the same as anyone else. Because it can happen, whether it happens to cisgender heterosexual Black folks one day, or trans, queer women of color, the next day. We have to care. We have to care. Our movement must be intersectional, because if it's not, then our people will die. And as we've seen, we've already lost more than 20 trans women this year alone in the United States to violent murder. And most of them are women of color. Although on January 1st, our first trans murder of the year was for a trans guy in Oklahoma on New Year's Day, just a couple hours after midnight. That's what the trans experience is still like in America. So even though in Virginia this year we passed so many pro-equality bills, it was an all-you-could-gay buffet this year in Virginia. It was amazing. We still have work to do. And we still have people who are hurt. And when we go back into special session this upcoming August, I'm going to be putting in a bill, for example, I'll give you guys a little bit of a preview. We're going to ban the gay and trans panic defense that is used in court to basically knock down the severity of murder charge or physical assault charge. And I'm also looking at a couple other areas, everything dealing with non-discrimination jury selection, so that if I, as a trans person, have to defend myself in court, that a jury of my peers will actually include someone who understands my life. Because It's a really scary place to be when you're looking at 12 people who don't know what you've come through and don't know what your background is. And I was also looking at, we had transparent defense, we had that one, and how trans people are treated in prison and incarceration in general, from the time of arrest all the way to being served. Because I had to hear of a case in Virginia about a trans woman being forced to shave her head after she was dead named and misgendered in a jail in Bland County, just so she could talk to her girlfriend on the phone. That's horrible. That should never happen, because that's the sort of stuff that drives people to suicide. Cisgender people might not understand. Oh, your hair grows back. When you're a trans woman and this is all you have left to cling on to, and someone takes that away from you, they've stripped you of that last little part of your dignity at that point. And it's not for all trans people. It's not the same universally. Trans people are not a monolith. But I want people to understand, above all else, that we have accomplished so much that needs to be celebrated, and we have so much more work to do. And that means whether you're in this nice, wonderful, progressive bastion of Montgomery County, where Councilmember Glass is still getting hate speech, or if you're in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where, we still, in our state constitution, have a ban against marriage equality that's unenforceable right now, and we need to repeal it. I already repealed the Marshall half of the Marshall-Newman Amendment. Now we need to repeal the actual constitutional amendment. So we've got our work cut out for us, and as we're doing it, let's make sure we do it together because of who we are, not despite it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Delegate. Congressman and Delegate, well said. I'm so glad we're recording this, because I'm trying really hard not to come off mute while you're both speaking to give snaps. I'm so excited to hear everything that you shared. Thank you so much. We're going to go into some questions. Some folks pre-submitted questions before the event began. We've already answered a question in the chat. So this one is for both of you. We'll start with you, Congressman Maloney. What is the next most likely frontier for LGBTQ rights as our movement continues to evolve, and it feels like we're evolving day by day, both with setbacks and with victories? What's next?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually was having this conversation recently with someone who supports the state of Israel, and who was talking about how galvanizing that issue can be for people in the Jewish community, and through years of facing legal discrimination and restrictive covenants and not being able to work where you wanted to, and as anti-Semitism came down, that Israel was still an urgent and rallying issue for many people in that community. And it just made me think, without getting into the issues of Israel, it made me think, what is our Israel? What are the issues in the LGBTQ movement that are still so resonant, that are still so powerful, that even when we've won all of our legal rights, as we increasingly have, and even as we have brought attitudes to an extraordinary new place in the United States, what are those issues? Well, obviously we've got real urgent issues still in the area of transgender equality, and Danica can speak better to that than I can, particularly with people of color, and we must do more there. There's a surprising number of things that we're going to have to still clean up. I've got legislation to stop Medicaid funding for conversion therapy. Believe it or not, we still do conversion therapy in this country, and it's reimbursed with taxpayer dollars. Those clinics bill the federal payment systems for the barbaric practice of conversion therapy. We aren't counted in the census. There's lots of things to do. But I think the primary answer to your question, and Danica touched on it, is that I think our job is to be allies for other social justice and progressive movements, and to use our model of success and of alliance building and coalition building to win victories in areas like immigration reform and the climate movement, in the Me Too movement, in gun safety legislation, because I do believe we have a gift to bring America, which is that we believed in the system. And it worked because we worked. It worked because we sat at card tables and we built, we built organizations, and we built coalition, and we welcome people into our struggle. because we knew that we weren't a large enough group on our own to win these rights, and that without changing larger attitudes and larger culture, we couldn't live in the kind of country where we could be safe and free. But that's true today for people who are undocumented. It's true today for transgender women who are being killed. It's true today for people who are marginalized for all kinds of reasons, and who live in a country that is so unequal in so many ways. And we've seen this bust into the open during the pandemic. It's laid bare how unequal our society is. So we can't just, I think we should be the voices that say, we don't want to go back to normal. We want a new normal. We want a new country, one that works better for everyone. And we know something about that. And we know something about building coalitions. And we know something about forgiveness and welcoming in, whether it's our own family members who are now maybe thinking differently about the way they treated us growing up, or the communities we grew up in that were harsh, who now want us to come back and talk to the kids in the high school. I think sometimes people overlook the power of reconciliation in our movement as a powerful example for how we can heal some of the wounds and divisions in our country, not just to be less divisive, but to build a larger coalition that has political capacity to make real change.
Hey, so I guess to follow up with that, where we need to go in our LGBTQ movement. Number one, healthcare. Because right now, these pills I just took, it now will depend on what state I'm in. It's now going to depend who my employer is. It's now going to depend on a whole lot of things about whether or not my insurance will actually cover this, whether or not I'll have health insurance in the first place, and whether or not people actually care to recognize the fact that LGBTQ healthcare is healthcare. It's non-elective, it's not optional. We are following our doctor's orders, whether it's gay men in PrEP, whether it's lesbians IVF, whether it is trans people like me taking hormone replacement therapy, whatever it is, our healthcare is our healthcare, and it needs to be respected and treated as our healthcare, because this is what we need to do. Next, criminal justice reform. Because of the way that Black Americans in general are treated, and actually just people of color in general are treated in terms of our criminal justice system, and the disproportionate rate of incarceration, of treating people of color in schools, for example, they are 3 times more likely to be suspended for the exact same offense as any other student, for example. When we are dealing with how police will interact with us and how first responders will interact, we have to look at this comprehensively from the time that an emergency happens until not only it has been resolved, but through hospitalization, through incarceration, whatever it is, that we are humanely treating people because of who they are. And I will tell you, we have stories like in Washington, D.C., of a trans woman who was in an accident, and first responders looked at her, they ridiculed her, and they didn't treat her until she was dying, and then she died. And that was because she was trans. That's still our reality. That hasn't changed. We have a lot more work to do. And as I say that, I have my little kitten climbing on my tights right now, scratching my legs. Say hello, everyone. Say hi, Melinda. But I would think that those are 2 of the most important issues for us to start with. And then the third is representation is power. One of the things that Congressman Maloney and I both know from being Victory Fund endorsees is that we must have a seat at the table if we are to expect to make any progress in terms of our civil rights. Because if we don't have our voices being heard, we are going to not only be left out, but we're going to be subject to being discriminated against even further by people who don't understand what our lived experience is like. Everywhere I walk in the Virginia General Assembly, I know what it's like to be the only person like me in that room. And before I was elected, that was a scary feeling, especially in 2016, when Republican House members introduced 9 anti-LGBTQ pieces of legislation, including 2 from my predecessor. And then the next year, he alone introduced 4 more. That was the reality. And the reality at the time wasn't even, hey, please pass this good bill. It was, please don't hurt me. Every time the Virginia General Assembly went into session, even as a neutral, dispassionate third-party observer or reporter, privately in my head, I had to think, what civil rights am I about to lose this year? That shouldn't be reality for anyone in America. And this is why passing the Equality Act in the first 100 days of the Biden administration is vital for the security of Americans, for our constituents. We must get the Equality Act passed. It won't have everything that we need in it, but it's a hell of a good start.
And if I can just add one last thing on that, we must not allow our rights, when established with things like the Equality Act and in Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, to be circumscribed through this notion of religious liberty, which as recently as today in the Supreme Court is being expanded. And for those who don't know, the idea would be that you could discriminate against LGBTQ people in ways that we would never tolerate against people on the basis of race or religion or national origin or disability. In other words, that the religious exemptions would be broader as applied to our community than we would tolerate against other communities. And that is an exception that will swallow our protections. And that may be the very clever strategy the court is pursuing by seeming to grant our rights and including us in Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, while soon saying, oh yeah, but if the discrimination is based on a sincere religious belief, even if done by a corporation selling to the public, that's the pizza case, that's the birthday cake case, those are accommodations, those are corporations. We would never allow them to discriminate against people on the basis of religion or race, but if they can deny a gay couple services based on their religion, then we are second class. And they will have taken away what we thought we wanted.
Well said. We have a couple more questions from the chat, and I know that Scott Comer has a question. So Scott, we're going to go to you, and then the 2 questions remaining in the chat after that.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Congressman and Council Member and Delegate, for joining us. First of all, it's an honor for all of us involved with the Central Committee to have had what I perceive to be 3 of the most effective questioners on the Judiciary Committee during the impeachment hearings. We had Congresswoman Demings just a couple weeks ago. We had Congressman Raskin all the time, and now we are so grateful to have you, Congressman Maloney. And I thought it was important to shout you out in particular because of today's news surrounding Lieutenant Colonel Vindman and the fact that it was you who elicited his answer that in America, right matters. And I think that's such an important point to point out, and I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And it breaks my heart that so far it hasn't.
Right.
That for Colonel Vindman and his brother, they don't care about right, and they've paid a price in their careers for telling the truth. And that's what disgusts me about guys like John Bolton making money when people who worked for him went up and did the right thing. But history is going to be kind to a guy like Colonel Vindman. And it's up to all of us to make sure in America right does matter. But thank you for saying that.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. My question is actually directed to both you and Delegate Rome, which is we've seen through the Bureau of Crime Statistics that Black and brown LGBTQ people are disproportionately targeted for acts of violence. And I think that speaks to your earlier remarks about solidarity in our community and working together and getting back to our roots, as you said, Delegate Rome, about what our community is about. So my question would be to both of you, how would you advise President-elect Biden to address these issues, both by restoring the independence and the authority of the criminal justice or the civil division of the DOJ, and then at the state level, Delegate Rome, what would you recommend?
You want to go first? What I can say real quickly is that, to your point, we have to make sure that violence against our community is, first of all, even counted. And so there's a thing called the National Violent Death Reporting System, believe it or not, at the Centers for Disease Control that right now does not include LGBTQ people. So the Pulse nightclub shooting, for example, there's no requirement that those acts of violence be reflected in the data as acts of violence targeted towards our community. And so if we're invisible, you know, it's very hard to show that we are still victims of violence. One of the first things I did was I attended the funeral of Matthew Shepard as the White House representative for President Clinton, and learned at an early stage how important it is that we elevate violence against our community. And so you got to count it. You can't manage what you don't measure. And I've got legislation that I introduced on the anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting to do just that. And so even little things like that can make a big difference. And then I'll turn it over to Danica for the rest of the answer.
So first is that even though we have the Matthew Shepard, James Byrd federal hate crime law, we have very few number of people who are actually prosecuted federally for violence against LGBTQ people under that law. It does happen, but it's very rare when it does. This is why it's important for us to actually have the hate crime statutes throughout our states individually. Virginia, we just passed ours this year because when you have a Democratic trifecta, guess what happens? We actually pass pro-equality legislation. And that one of the cases I need to make right now is that even in the South, the Democratic Party of 2020 is not the Dixiecrat Party of yore that used to dominate Southern politics. It's different now. When Roy Cooper gets reelected this year, I want you to keep in mind in North Carolina, you flip 5 seats in the state Senate and 6 seats in the state House, you have a Democratic trifecta. And you will have progressive Democrats able to pass good bills instead of HB2 and stupid crap like that. So the first place that I would go with in terms of how to direct this from the state is for the states to set the example that the federal government and members like Congressman Maloney can then borrow to bring into federal law. Because one of the things we love to talk about as Americans is that the states are the laboratory of democracy, right? Well, in Virginia right now, when we passed the Virginia Values Act this year, and we passed Delegate Levine's bill that added sexual orientation, gender identity to 70 sections of non-discrimination code, I think those are pretty good examples that we can, bring up to Congress. And my Congresswoman Wexton, she dealt with LGBTQ non-discrimination in housing every year that she was in Richmond. That was one of her top issues. And now we actually have her not only, this is one of the such important things about, by the way, electing people who have subject matter expertise in LGBTQ issues and electing them into Congress. Because what she did with Ben Carson, when he lied to her on national television, she called his ass out on it. She called him out for when he was basically saying that, oh, well, we don't have any plans to make sure that trans people won't be able to have emergency housing. Oh, wait, what happened the next day? She saw it coming a mile away and called for his resignation. The fact that we have someone who spent so much time on that, that's because for Congresswoman Wexton, this is her family we're talking about. This is her friends, her constituent. These are her, this matters to her. We have to elect more people who have personal stake in this, who actually care, because they will bring that subject matter expertise into Congress to be able to work with DOJ and understand every federal agency when they're not doing something that's inclusive and protective. We can't just leave it up to the idea that we're going to have Democrats there and Democrats because they're Democrats are going to do good Democratic things. We have to have subject matter experts like Congressman Maloney who can talk fluently and in great detail about adoption policy, for example, and how the Trump administration, whether it's through executive orders or everything else, we're going to have to go back and basically dismantle all the horrible things that they've done. And if we have those Democratic majorities and things don't get clogged up in the Senate, we're going to have 2 years to make sure that we can get everything that we've got. Because here's one thing about Democratic majority: use it while you got it. Majorities are, politics is a pendulum. It is good that we are winning right now. It is good that things are going our way. But just as it will go this way, it will go right back at some other point. We need to use our majorities, and we need to do it in a way where we are setting the tone and example for inclusivity across America, because then when the other side does return back to power, it will be, the American public will be used to equality. They were not used to equality in 2010. They are going to be more used to equality this year. And they are going to be more used to equality every single year that we get good legislation done at the national level.
Thank you both so much. We had some other questions in the chat, but we are at 6:57, so I'm going to turn things over to Councilmember Glass to give the closing remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Sam, and thank you, Congressman Maloney and Delegate Rome. I really appreciate your insight, and more importantly, I appreciate your leadership, both on Capitol Hill and across the Potomac in Virginia, where it is needed. We are fortunate here in Montgomery County to live in a beautifully diverse place. You know, Montgomery County has 1.1 million people, and 4 of the 10 most diverse communities in the entire country are here in Montgomery County. And that takes a lot of work, but it is a signal that we value our diversity. And we work really hard to protect it. But as both of you have noted, there's a lot more work that can be done. And Congressman Maloney and Delegate Rome both spoke about healthcare and the need to continue to increase protections and safety. And I am so proud of the efforts that you are both leading in various jurisdictions and at various levels of government. And as Sam noted at the beginning of this conversation, just yesterday I introduced a piece of legislation here in Montgomery County, the LGBTQ Bill of Rights, which is basically about healthcare. That despite a lot of the protections we have here in Maryland and some of the protections that the Supreme Court gave, but as was noted, they gave, they take away, they make it really difficult. And so nobody is to be praised, especially Justice Roberts and some others. But here in Montgomery County, where we can make some impactful change, I will just very briefly share with you what my proposal does. And that is to expand the scope of our anti-discrimination law to include healthcare facilities, nursing homes, and personal care facilities, so that gender expression and HIV status are added to our anti-discrimination code, so that when people seek healthcare, they are not discriminated against because of who they are or because of certain medical history that they might have. And then it also prohibits the medical and healthcare providers from denying service based on sexual orientation, gender identity, HIV status, and gender expression, as I said. And then, you know, it goes into it a little bit more just about pronouns as well. And it explicitly says in our anti-discrimination code that pronouns cannot be used as hate speech. That you cannot, in a medical setting, use pronouns in a derogatory way repeatedly, and it defines it that way. And so that legislation was introduced yesterday, and there will be a public hearing on July 28th, a few weeks from now at 1:30 in the afternoon. So for all of you Montgomery County residents and activists, please reach out to me if you have any questions about it, would like to support it, particularly because it is rather specific to some of the seniors in our community, but more broadly, everybody. I do hope that it gets wide support, and I'll end on this note. It has unanimous support from all my colleagues. So I know it is going to pass, but we need to keep using our platform as an educational one so that hopefully folks across the Potomac, folks just down the road on Capitol Hill recognize that here in Maryland, we are continuing to lead to make sure that our LGBTQ plus community is safe and secure, to make sure that Black lives matter, to make sure that Black trans lives matter, and that everybody feels safe and secure, whomever they are and wherever they live. And so I just really want to thank all of you for joining this conversation tonight. It was really good to hear everyone's perspectives and everyone's leadership at the various levels. And again, thank you to the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee for hosting tonight, for recognizing the importance of this conversation. And let's go on to win in November, right? And so I'll turn it back. I don't know if Linda or Sam have any closing comments, but I just want to say thank you. And let's get it done in November.
I think that's a great way to end this, Evan. Absolutely. Sorry, council member. Yeah, let's get it done in November. I'm so thrilled that we have so many wonderful Democratic leaders, congressman, delegate, council member. Thank you for joining us. Everyone who attended, really, really appreciate your time. We recorded like 96.5% of this. So we will be sharing that link. I appreciate everyone's time again. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here. And let's, as Evan said, let's go win. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Night. Stay safe.
Thank you.